To begin with, we can eliminate statements A, C, and D because they give us the context of this particular paragraph. A says, in these trophic relationships, it should not be assured that only the heterotrophs benefit. C tells us, in most ecosystems, several types of food chains interlock to form complex food webs. And then D says, organisms may spend their time in several trophic levels, perhaps at different stages in their life cycle, being, for example, an herbivorous juvenile that develops into a carnivorous adult or vice versa. So we find that the opening of this is C, which says in most ecosystems, several types of food chains interlock to form complex food webs. Then we have D, which says organisms may spend their time in several trophic levels which we see referenced in A as well, perhaps at different stages in their life cycle, being, for example, an herbivorous juvenile develops into a carnivorous adult or vice versa. We see trophic relationships as given in this statement, in statement D. Trophic relationships mentioned again in A, these trophic relationships, it should not be assured that only the heterotrophs benefit. Then we have, so let's clear this out. We can eliminate A, C, and D. Next, we have statements B and F. B tells us, Owen and Wiegert speak of a mutualistic relationship between plants and herbivores, where compensating mechanisms sometimes operate, and moderate grazing actually promotes plant growth. This is a much more direct statement because it talks about a relationship, a mutualistic relationship between plants and herbivores, where compensating mechanisms sometimes operate, and moderate grazing actually promotes plant growth. One would normally think that grazing, eating of plants, grass, etc., by herbivores is something that would cause a depletion in the plant life, or a reduction, at least if at all a stagnation in the plant growth. But this presents evidence otherwise, contradictory to that moderate grazing actually promotes plant growth. We move to F, which supports this argument. It says, there is increasing evidence that herbivore grazing does not always lead to a decline in plant yield. So this repeats the same aspect as B. In fact, in a sequence, if we were to be sequencing this, F would precede B. It says that herbivore grazing does not always lead to a decline in plant yield. Rather, moderate grazing can actually improve or promote plant growth. So these two are connected. Finally, we come to statement E, which says, Dwyer's finding that the saliva of some grazing animals contains a chemical which stimulates plant growth. If we had just this part, we would say that this connects very strongly with F and B, because F and B make exactly this argument. Grazing, moderate grazing by herbivores can actually improve or promote plant growth. So this says Dwyer's findings that the saliva of some grazing animals contains a chemical that stimulates plant growth. So if there's more grazing, moderate grazing, as long as no direct damage is done to the plants, moderate grazing causes more of this saliva to be spread on the plants, which stimulates plant growth. But then it goes on to say that this challenges these ideas. Challenges which ideas? The ideas presented in B and F. If that be the case, then this statement is actually contradictory. In essence, it is contradictory to B and F. If it is not talking about these ideas, what other ideas? We have already seen how A, C, and D give us a very general brief, a very general outlook towards the premise of the passage. So would it be challenging those ideas? Then again, A, C, and D, they basically build the premise to the arguments in B and F. So to challenge A, C, and D would also be to challenge B and F. If it is talking about some other ideas, ideas which are not part of the premise, then at best, this statement is outside the premise. This statement is irrelevant. So we find that E cannot be connected to the other statements. So we have eliminated statements B and F also. Statement E is the one which is different from the others. So the correct answer is E.